Martha Fraser stood on the edge of the grave, watching the pine coffin descend into the dark earth. The April wind whipped across the small cemetery, carrying the minister's words away before they could reach her ears. Not that it mattered. Nothing he said would bring William back or explain why her husband of barely 2 years had collapsed at his desk without warning, leaving her alone in a town where she knew almost no one. She felt hollow, like someone had scooped out her insides and left just enough of her standing to maintain appearances. The mourners, mostly William's business acquaintances and a few neighbors, kept a respectful distance. Their sympathy was genuine but shallow. After all, the Frasers had only moved to Cottonwood Springs 18 months ago, hardly enough time to form deep connections. Mrs. Fraser? Sheriff Daniels approached as the small crowd began to disperse. He removed his hat, revealing a shock of graying hair. "I'm sorry to intrude on your grief, but there are some matters that need your attention when you're feeling up to it." Martha turned toward him, her black veil shifting with the movement. "What matters, Sheriff?" "Your husband's affairs. There are complications." He looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps you could come by my office tomorrow?" Complications. The word hung in the air between them. Martha straightened her spine. "I'll be there at 9, Sheriff." That night, Martha sat alone in the small house that she and William had rented upon their arrival in Cottonwood Springs. The lamplight cast long shadows across the parlor as she sorted through William's papers. Bills, correspondence, receipts. The mundane documentation of a life suddenly cut short. She had met William Fraser at a church social back in Boston. He was 15 years her senior, a widower with no children, looking to start fresh. Martha, at 26, had resigned herself to spinsterhood until William's courtship. He'd been kind, stable, and promised her a life of modest comfort. Not a grand passion, perhaps, but a partnership she had come to value deeply. Now, as she lifted the lid of his wooden box of personal papers, Martha was struck by how little she actually knew about her husband's business dealings. William had always been vague about his work, assuring her that everything was taken care of. She'd been content to leave such matters to him, focusing instead on making their rented house a home. Inside the box, she found a document that made her heart nearly stop. A partnership agreement for the town's general store, Holloway and Fraser, proprietors, was signed just weeks after they'd arrived in Cottonwood Springs. The document clearly stated that William Fraser had purchased a 40% interest in the business for the sum of $1,200. Martha's hand trembled. $1,200. Her dowry money. The inheritance from her grandmother that she'd brought to the marriage, trusting William to invest it wisely for their future. "Oh, William," she whispered to the empty room, "what have you done?" The sheriff's office smelled of tobacco and leather. Martha sat primly on a hard wooden chair, her hands folded in her lap, as Sheriff Daniels explained the situation. "According to the partnership agreement, you now own Mr. Fraser's share of Holloway's general store," he said, uncomfortable with the business of explaining legal matters to a woman. "However, Mr. Holloway has expressed his unwillingness to recognize the arrangement." "Unwillingness?" Martha asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "He claims the partnership was with William specifically, not with his estate. He says there was nothing in writing about heirs or widows." The sheriff shifted in his chair. "He's offering to buy back the shares for $300. $300? Martha felt heat rise to her face. "Would my husband pay $1,200? That's robbery." Sheriff Daniels looked sympathetic but helpless. "You could contest it, of course. Take it before a judge, but that could take months and legal fees." He let the sentence trail off. Martha understood the implication. She had less than $50 to her name. The rent on the house was due in 2 weeks. William had left no savings that she could find. Just this partnership in a business run by a man who apparently wanted nothing to do with her. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Holloway myself," she said, rising from her chair. The sheriff looked alarmed. "Mrs. Fraser, Elias Holloway is not an easy man in the best of circumstances. Since his wife died 5 years back, he's been downright ornery. Perhaps I could speak to him on your behalf." Martha gathered her reticule. "Thank you, Sheriff, but this is my future at stake. I'll handle Mr. Holloway myself." Holloway's general store occupied the largest building on Cottonwood Springs Main Street. The whitewashed facade was weather-beaten but solid, with large display windows showcasing tools, fabrics, and household goods. A bell jingled as Martha pushed open the door. The store was busy with mid-morning customers. A young woman with copper-colored hair was wrapping parcels behind the counter, while a tall, broad-shouldered man with a full beard and perpetual scowl directed a clerk stacking sacks of flour. Martha recognized Elias Holloway from William's funeral, though he'd stood at the back and left before the service ended. She approached him directly, removing her gloves. "Mr. Holloway, I'm Martha Fraser. I believe we have business to discuss." Holloway looked down at her, his expression hardening. "We have nothing to discuss, Mrs. Fraser." "I've made my offer through the sheriff." "An offer that amounts to highway robbery," Martha replied, keeping her voice low but firm. "My husband invested $1,200 in this business. My money, Mr. Holloway. My inheritance." A muscle twitched in Holloway's jaw. "Whatever arrangements you had with your husband are of no concern of mine. The partnership was with William Fraser, not his widow." Martha was acutely aware of the customers pretending not to listen. "Then I suggest you reconsider your position. According to Colorado territorial law, I inherit my husband's business interests. I am now your business partner, Mr. Holloway, whether you like it or not." She had no idea if what she was saying was legally sound, but the bluff seemed to work. Holloway's face reddened beneath his beard. "In my office." "Now," he growled, turning toward the back of the store. The office was little more than a glorified storeroom with a desk crammed against one wall. Holloway shut the door firmly behind them and rounded on her. "Listen here, Mrs. Fraser. I don't care what legal claim you think you have. I won't have some city woman who knows nothing about running a frontier store interfering in my business." Martha held her ground. "I don't wish to interfere, Mr. Holloway. I wish to be fairly compensated for my husband's, my share of this business. And I told you my offer. $300. "That is unacceptable." Martha shook her head. "I'll need to review the store's accounts to determine the true value of my investment." Holloway barked a laugh. "You? Review accounts? What does a woman know of business matters?" Martha smiled thinly. "Before my marriage, I worked as a bookkeeper for my father's shipping business in Boston for 8 years. I assure you I'm quite capable of understanding a general store's ledgers." This clearly wasn't the response Holloway had expected. He scowled deeper, if that was possible. "Fine. I'll have the books prepared for your inspection, but don't expect to find anything that'll change my mind about that offer." Martha gathered her courage. "In the meantime, I intend to work here." "What?" Holloway looked genuinely shocked. "As part owner, I have a right to be involved in the business. And more practically, Mr. Holloway, I need an income." She straightened her shoulders. "I can handle customers, manage inventory, or assist with the books. Whatever is most useful." "Absolutely not," Holloway sputtered. "Then I'll be forced to seek legal remedies immediately." It was another bluff, but she delivered it confidently. "I'm sure the judge would be interested in how you're attempting to swindle a widow out of her rightful inheritance." Holloway stared at her for a long moment. Finally, he growled, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Don't be late, and don't expect special treatment." Martha was trying not to show her relief. "Thank you, Mr. Holloway. I look forward to our partnership." As she left the store, her knees felt weak. She had stood her ground against the intimidating Elias Holloway and won, at least this round. But she had no illusions about the battle ahead. He would make working in the store as difficult as possible, hoping to drive her away. What Martha needed now was information about the store's true value, about her legal rights, about Elias Holloway himself. And for that, she would need an ally. The sign for the Cottonwood Springs Gazette hung from the building next door to the general store. Martha had never met the editor, but William had mentioned him occasionally. He was a scholarly type who'd come west for his health and apparently was well respected in town. She hesitated only a moment before pushing open the door to the newspaper office. The printing shop smelled of ink and paper, a scent that immediately reminded Martha of her father's office back in Boston. A large press dominated the room, and stacks of newsprint were piled neatly against one wall. A man in shirt sleeves stood with his back to her, setting type in a frame. He was of medium height and build, with light brown hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Excuse me," Martha said. He turned, revealing a pleasant face with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. When he saw Martha, he quickly removed his ink-stained apron and rolled down his sleeves. "Mrs. Fraser, isn't it?" His voice was gentle but clear. "I'm terribly sorry about your husband." William was a good man. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Tyler Bennett." He gestured to a chair beside a small desk. "Please, sit down. Can I offer you some tea?" Martha sat gratefully. "No, thank you. I've come seeking advice, Mr. Bennett." "I'm flattered, though I'm not sure what counsel a newspaper editor can offer a lady such as yourself." Martha briefly explained her situation about the partnership, Holloway's resistance, and her need to work. Tyler listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes on a small pad. "Legally, you're on solid ground," he said when she finished. "As William's widow, you inherit his business interests. But practically speaking, Elias Holloway is a formidable opponent." "You know him well?" Bennett's expression turned thoughtful. "We've had our battles. The Gazette has criticized some of his business practices. He price gouged during last winter's blizzard, for instance. But I also understand his pain. Losing Margaret nearly destroyed him." "His wife?" "Yes. Consumption took her 5 years ago. She left him with their daughter, Louisa. She's a sweet girl, but wild as a Mustang these days. Grief does strange things to people." Tyler set down his pencil. "Elias Holloway throws himself into the store. It's all he has left besides Louisa." Martha considered this. Understanding Elias's loss didn't excuse his behavior, but it helped explain his fierce protectiveness of the business. "I don't want to take anything from him," she said quietly. "I just need to survive." "That's understandable," Mr. Bennett added. "And I believe you. And I'm happy to help however I can. I have some legal knowledge, enough to review documents for you. And my doors are always open if you need a respite from Holloway's temper." Martha felt a rush of gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. I may take you up on that offer quite frequently." He smiled, which lent a warm expression. "Please do. And call me Tyler." Martha's first day at Holloway's general store was even more difficult than she'd anticipated. Elias had assigned her to the fabric counter, clearly expecting her to be comfortable there simply because she was a woman. What he hadn't mentioned was that the inventory was hopelessly disorganized, with no system for tracking what was in stock versus what needed to be ordered. By midday, her back ached from reaching for bolts of fabric on high shelves, and her fingers were sore from measuring and cutting. Worse was the constant awareness of Elias watching her, obviously waiting for her to make a mistake. During her lunch break, which consisted of a hasty beef sandwich eaten in the storeroom, a copper-haired young woman appeared in the doorway. "Pa's in a right state today," she said without introduction. "I reckon that's your doing." Martha looked up, recognizing Elias Holloway's daughter. Up close, she was striking rather than pretty, with her father's strong features softened by youth and her mother's coloring. "You must be Louisa," Martha said warmly. "I'm Martha Fraser." "I know who you are." Louisa leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Everyone's talking about how you're trying to take over Pa's store." "I'm not taking over on anything." "My husband was Mr. Holloway's partner." Louisa snorted. "Partner? Pa never wanted a partner. Your husband talked him into it when we needed cash for the new stock after the railroad came through." This was news to Martha. "William convinced your father to take him on as a partner?" "Pa says he was too smooth by half." Louisa studied Martha with frank curiosity. "You don't look like much of a businesswoman." "And what does a businesswoman look like exactly?" Martha asked, more amused than offended. Louisa shrugged. "Not like you. You are too pretty, too soft." Before Martha could respond, Elias Holloway's voice boomed from the front of the store. "Louisa! Stop bothering Mrs. Fraser and get back to work." Louisa rolled her eyes dramatically. "He thinks you're going to run screaming back to Boston by the end of the week. Are you?" Martha smiled slightly. "I'm afraid your father will be disappointed if that is what he is expecting me to do." A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed Louisa's face before she turned and sauntered away. The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, many of whom seemed to have come specifically to gawk at poor Mrs. Fraser, working behind the counter. Martha endured their pitying looks and whispered comments with as much dignity as she could muster. By closing time, she was exhausted. As she was putting away the last bolt of calico, Holloway approached. "You managed not to drive away all our customers," he said gruffly. "I suppose that's something?" Martha recognized this as the closest thing to a compliment she was likely to receive. "I noticed we're low on blue gingham and the spring muslin, and the wool section is disorganized. The winter and summer weights are all mixed together." Elias frowned. "Louisa was supposed to sort those last month." I could reorganize the entire fabric section if you like. I can create a proper inventory system. Do what you want with the fabrics, he said dismissively. Just don't expect me to change how I run the rest of my store. Our store, Martha corrected gently. Holloway scowled deepened at her reminder. Go home, Mrs. Fraser. We open at 8 sharp tomorrow. As Martha left the store, she noticed Tyler Bennett watching from the doorway of the Gazette. He tipped his hat to her. Survived day one, I see, he said, smiling. Barely, Martha admitted. Mr. Holloway is determined to make this as difficult as possible. Come in for a moment, Tyler offered. I've just made coffee. The newspaper office was quiet and peaceful after the chaos of the store. Tyler cleared a stack of papers from a chair and poured her a cup of surprisingly good coffee. How do you manage to make decent coffee in a printing shop? Martha asked, grateful for the warmth seeping into her tired hands. It's one of my few talents, Tyler said with a grin. That and writing editorials that annoy local businessmen. Martha found herself laughing for the first time since William's death. It felt strange, almost disloyal, but also necessary. I've been thinking about your situation, Tyler said, his expression turning serious. If you're truly determined to work with Elias rather than fight him in court, you'll need to make yourself indispensable. That will be easier said than done. He's determined to see me as an interloper. Then surprise him. Learn the business inside and out. Find ways to improve it that even he can't ignore. Tyler leaned forward. Elias is stubborn, but he's not stupid. He knows the store could be doing better. Martha considered this. The fabric section is a mess. And I noticed the display windows haven't been changed in months. In Boston, shops change their displays weekly to draw customers. There you have it, Tyler said. Start small. Prove your value. As the sun set over Cottonwood Springs, Martha walked home with a renewed sense of purpose. She would make herself indispensable to Elias Holloway's store, their store, no matter how hard he fought against it. Over the next 2 weeks, Martha threw herself into transforming the fabric section of Holloway's general store. She reorganized everything by type, weight, and color, created a detailed inventory system, and designed an elegant display of spring fabrics in the front window that drew immediate attention from the women of Cottonwood Springs. Elias grudgingly acknowledged the increase in fabric sales, but remained stubbornly opposed to her other suggestions. The ledgers, he insisted, were off limits. The way he organized tools and hardware was not to be questioned, and her ideas about advertising specials in Tyler Bennett's newspaper were dismissed outright. Tyler would love nothing more than to print my business in his paper. Holloway growled when she suggested it. I won't give him the satisfaction. Martha was beginning to understand the complicated relationship between the two men. Tyler explained it one evening as they shared coffee in his office after closing time, which was a ritual that had quickly become Martha's favorite part of the day. Elias blames me for an editorial I wrote after Margaret died, Tyler said, cleaning his spectacles with a handkerchief. The town doctor had prescribed a miracle tonic that cost the Holloways a small fortune. After Margaret's death, I discovered the doctor was getting kickbacks from the tonic company. I exposed the scheme in the Gazette. That seems like something Elias would thank you for, Martha said, puzzled. Tyler shook his head. Elias had convinced himself the tonic was working. When I proved it was snake oil, it meant he'd wasted precious months that could have been spent trying real treatments. He's never forgiven me for that. Martha's heart ached for both men. For Tyler, who had only been seeking the truth, and for Elias, trapped in regret and bitterness. Her relationship with Louisa Holloway was evolving in unexpected ways as well. The girl alternated between open hostility and reluctant curiosity about Martha. One moment she'd be sullenly ignoring directions. The next she'd be asking pointed questions about Boston society or how Martha had learned bookkeeping. My father believed girls should understand business, Martha explained one afternoon as they unpacked a shipment of ribbons. He said too many women were left destitute when their husbands died because they didn't understand money. Louisa considered this. My ma knew everything about the store. She kept the books before. She trailed off, her expression clouding. Before she fell ill, Martha finished gently. Your father must have relied on her a great deal. He still keeps her system for the ledgers, Louisa said. He won't let anyone else touch them. Not even me. This information gave Martha an idea. If Elias was still using his wife's bookkeeping system, perhaps Louisa could be her ally in understanding the store's true financial situation. That evening, Martha mentioned her theory to Tyler as they reviewed an old partnership agreement he'd found for reference. Be careful, he warned. Using Louisa to get to Elias's books could backfire. The girl is volatile at best. I'm not trying to use her, Martha protested, but she deserves to learn her mother's system. The store will be hers someday. Tyler gave her a searching look. Just remember that Elias is like a wounded bear when it comes to his daughter. One wrong move, and he'll lash out at anyone he perceives as a threat. Martha understood the warning, but she also saw an opportunity to connect with Louisa while potentially gaining access to vital information about the business. The next day, she approached the girl during a quiet moment in the store. Louisa, I was wondering if you might help me understand something about the inventory system. Martha began carefully. Louisa narrowed her eyes. Pa said you're not to mess with his system? I don't want to change anything, Martha assured her. I just want to understand it. Your mother created it, didn't she? It seems very efficient. A flicker of pride crossed Louisa's face. Ma was smart about such things. She could add columns of figures in her head faster than Pa. That's impressive, Martha said sincerely. My father always said I had a good head for numbers, but I've never been able to calculate that quickly. Ma taught me some of it before. Louisa swallowed. I was only 12 when she died. Would you like to learn more? Martha asked gently. About your mother's system? Louisa looked wary. Pa doesn't want me bothering with the books. Perhaps he's trying to protect you from taking on too much responsibility, Martha suggested. But you're 17 now, aren't you? Nearly a woman grown. Shouldn't you understand the business that will someday be yours? The idea seemed to take root in Louisa's mind. Over the next few days, Martha noticed the girl paying closer attention to the store's operations and watched her father work with a new interest. And when Martha reorganized the notions display, Louisa offered suggestions that genuinely improved the arrangement. Elias also noticed the change in his daughter. Martha caught him watching them one afternoon as they worked together, his expression unreadable. That evening, he approached Martha as she was preparing to leave. What have you been saying to my daughter? He asked bluntly. Martha met his gaze steadily. Only that she has a good mind for business, like her mother. Elias flinched at the mention of his wife, but didn't lash out as Martha had expected. Louisa's been asking about the ledgers, he said, and about Margaret's system. Is that so terrible? For a daughter to want to learn what her mother created? Elias was silent for a long moment. Margaret wanted her to know. Before she died, she made me promise I'd teach Louisa when she was old enough. His voice roughened. I couldn't do it. Every time I opened those books, I saw Margaret's handwriting, her neat columns of figures. Perhaps it's time, Martha said softly. Not for my sake, Mr. Holloway, but for Louisa's. And for Margaret's. Elias looked away, his jaw working. I'll think on it, he said finally, which Martha took as a significant concession. As May turned to June, small changes began to appear in the store. Martha's fabric and notion section was thriving. The display windows, which she now changed weekly, drew increased foot traffic. Louisa, showing unexpected talent for design, had begun creating eye-catching arrangements of household goods. Most surprising was Elias's gradual thawing. He still grumbled about Martha's innovations, but he no longer rejected them outright. When she suggested stocking ready-made shirtwaists for women too busy to sew their own, he actually considered the idea before approving a small trial order. One evening, he silently placed the store's ledger on the counter in front of her. Louisa says you understand bookkeeping, he said gruffly. Margaret's system is different from most. She created shortcuts I've never fully understood. Martha recognized the magnitude of this gesture. I'd be happy to look at it with you both, she said carefully. Perhaps between the three of us, we can decipher her methods. That night after closing, Martha, Elias, and Louisa sat at the desk in the back office, poring over Margaret Holloway's elegant system of notations and calculations. It was indeed ingenious, with a modified double-entry method that tracked not just sales and purchases, but also seasonal patterns and customer preferences. Your mother was brilliant, Martha said to Louisa, genuinely impressed. This system predicts inventory needs based on previous year's patterns. Louisa beamed with pride. I remember her working on it. Pa would tease her about all the little marks and symbols she used. Elias's expression softened at the memory. She'd wave me away, saying men couldn't understand her feminine logic. He shook his head. She was right about that. As they worked together, Martha gradually gained a clearer picture of the store's finances. Contrary to what she'd feared, the business was solid, though not as profitable as it could be. William's investment had indeed been used to expand inventory after the railroad connection brought new opportunities and new competition from catalog sales. What became clear was that Elias's resistance to Martha wasn't personal or because she was a woman. He simply couldn't afford to buy her out at full value without putting the store at risk. $300 was all he could spare without taking on debt. This realization changed Martha's perspective. She wasn't facing a stubborn opponent determined to cheat her. She was dealing with a proud man trying to keep his business afloat while protecting his daughter's inheritance. The next morning, Martha arrived at the store to find Tyler waiting outside. His expression was grave. "What is it?" she asked, immediately concerned. "The territorial bank inspector is in town," Tyler said quietly. "Word is he's reviewing all business loans in the county after irregularities were found in Silver Creek." Martha felt a chill when she heard the name of a nearby town. "Holloway's general store has loans?" "Yes," Tyler noted, "and it's a substantial one, taken out after William became a partner." "I thought you should know before the inspector arrives." Martha thanked him and hurried inside, finding Elias already at his desk, surrounded by papers. "Mr. Holloway," she began, "I've just heard about the bank inspector." Elias looked up sharply. "Tyler told you, I suppose. The man can't keep his nose out of other people's business." "He thought I should be prepared," Martha said evenly. "As your partner." Elias scratched the top of his graying hair. "The loan isn't a problem. We're current on payments. But the bank requires certain profit margins to maintain our terms. We've been just meeting them. Barely." He looked uncomfortable. "Your husband knew about the arrangement." Martha felt a flare of anger at William for keeping her in the dark about yet another aspect of their finances. What happens if we fall below those margins? "The interest rate doubles," Elias said grimly. "We couldn't absorb that cost." Martha thought quickly. "When is the inspector coming?" "Tomorrow morning. He'll want to see the last 3 months of records." She calculated that this would include the time from William's death to the time when her changes to the store's operations were just beginning to show results. The most recent weeks had shown the most improvement, but it might not be enough to satisfy a skeptical inspector. "We need to impress him," Martha said decisively, "not just with our books, but with the store itself." Elias looked skeptical. "The man will care about numbers, not appearances." "Everyone cares about appearances, Mr. Holloway. Especially men who judge businesses for a living." Martha was already making plans. "Louisa and I will rearrange the front of the store tonight. Tomorrow morning we'll open early and make sure everything is pristine." To her surprise, Elias didn't argue. "Do what you think best," he said, turning back to his papers. Martha spent the day working with renewed urgency, delegating regular tasks to the clerk so she could focus on preparing for the inspector. Louisa, excited by the challenge, threw herself into cleaning and organizing. After closing, Tyler appeared with coffee and sandwiches for everyone as they worked late into the evening. Martha noticed the careful distance he and Elias maintained, communicating only through her or Louisa, despite working in the same space. By midnight, the transformation was complete. The store gleamed with polish, every display arranged to showcase their best merchandise. Martha had created special signs highlighting locally made goods, and Louisa had decorated the front counter with fresh wildflowers in a pottery vase made by a local craftsman. "It looks good," Elias admitted as they prepared to leave. "Better than it has in years." "We make a good team," Martha said, including all of them in her glance. Tyler, still there and helping, caught her eye, a small smile playing at his lips. "Indeed, we do." The bank inspector, a short, precise man named Mr. Hargrove, arrived promptly at 9 the next morning. Martha's heart sank when she recognized him. He'd been a frequent customer at her father's shipping office in Boston and was notorious for his demanding nature and attention to detail. "Mrs. Fraser," he said, clearly surprised to see her. "I was unaware you had connections to this establishment." "Hello, Mr. Hargrove. I'm now part owner of Holloway's General Store," Martha explained, offering her hand. "My husband was Mr. Holloway's partner." Mr. Hargrove's eyebrows rose. "Indeed? How unexpected." Martha led him to Elias, who was waiting stiffly by the office door, ledgers ready. For the next 2 hours, they reviewed the store's finances while Martha provided context for the recent improvements in sales. As you can see, she explained, pointing to the most recent entries, our fabric department sales have increased 20% since the reorganization, and our customers love the new display strategy. Mr. Hargrove made non-committal noises as he examined the figures. Your margins are thin, Mr. Holloway. Very thin. But they are improving, Martha interjected, and we have plans for further enhancements. She outlined their strategy for expanding into ready-made goods and creating seasonal promotions. That is interesting, Mr. Hargrove said, making notes. Your previous quarters showed stagnation. This recent improvement coincides with Mrs. Fraser's involvement? Elias cleared his throat. Mrs. Fraser has brought new perspectives to the business, he admitted grudgingly. Our partnership has been beneficial. Martha glanced at him, surprised by this acknowledgement. After Mr. Hargrove departed with assurances that his report would reflect the store's improving situation, Martha turned to Elias. Thank you for what you said. Elias looked uncomfortable. It was only the truth. The store is doing better with you here. He hesitated. I've been thinking about your situation. The partnership. And? Martha prompted when he fell silent. I still can't afford to buy you out at full value, he said bluntly, but perhaps we could formalize our working arrangement. I will make you a proper partner with a percentage of the profits rather than a salary. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a recognition of her value to the business. I think that could work, Martha said carefully, though we would need to put everything in writing this time. Elias agreed. Tyler could draw up the papers. He's good with legal documents, much as I hate to admit it. Martha smiled. I'll ask him. July brought scorching heat to Cottonwood Springs. The store was stifling despite open windows and doors. Customers moved languidly through the aisles, seeking shade more than merchandise. Martha, Elias, and Louisa had settled into an unexpected rhythm over the past month. The new partnership agreement, drafted by Tyler, gave Martha a 20% share of the profits in addition to her 40% ownership stake. It wasn't wealth, but it allowed her to move from the rented house to a small apartment above the millinery shop and begin setting aside modest savings. More surprising was the gradual shift in her relationship with the Holloways. Louisa now sought her advice on everything from fashion to dealing with unwanted suitors. Elias, while still gruff, had begun to consult her on business decisions, recognizing her skill with numbers and eye for merchandising. Martha's friendship with Tyler had deepened as well. Their evening conversations had become the highlight of her days. He was thoughtful, well-read, and genuinely interested in her opinions. Unlike William, who had always gently directed her away from unfeminine topics like politics or business, Tyler engaged with her as an intellectual equal. It was during one such conversation, as they sat in the relative cool of the printing shop after closing, that Tyler broached a subject they'd both been avoiding. People are talking, he said, carefully cleaning his spectacles. About us. About the time we spend together? Martha felt heat rise to her face. I'm aware. I don't want to compromise your reputation, Tyler continued, or complicate your situation with Elias. My reputation is already that of an unconventional widow who works in a store, Martha pointed out. I'm not sure it can be much further compromised. He smiled. Nevertheless, I respect you too much to let gossip damage what you've built here. Are you suggesting we stop our conversations? Martha asked, surprised by how much the thought distressed her. No, Tyler said quickly. I'm suggesting that perhaps we should acknowledge what these conversations have meant to us. Martha looked down at her hands. Tyler, I'm not sure I'm ready. I'm not asking for anything, Martha, he interrupted gently. Only honesty between us. My feelings for you have grown beyond friendship. But I understand that your situation is complicated, and your heart may need more time. Before Martha could respond, a commotion erupted outside. There were loud shouts and the clanging of the town's fire bell. They rushed to the door to see people running toward the far end of Main Street, where an ominous orange glow lit the evening sky. Fire! Someone shouted as they passed. The lumberyard's ablaze. Tyler immediately grabbed his coat. I need to cover this for the paper. Will you be all right? I'll be fine, Martha added. But as Tyler disappeared into the growing crowd, a horrible thought struck her. The lumberyard was directly behind Holloway's general store, separated only by a narrow alley. She hitched up her skirts and ran toward the store. Already she could see sparks floating on the hot summer breeze, landing on the wooden shingles of buildings along the street. Men were forming bucket brigades, while women hurried children and elderly residents away from danger. When Martha reached the general store, she found Elias and several other men on the roof, beating out sparks with wet blankets. Louisa was inside, frantically gathering ledgers and important papers. "Martha," Louisa cried when she saw her. "Thank God." "Help me with the strong box. Pa says we need to get everything valuable out in case the fire jumps the alley." Together they worked to save what they could: money, documents, and the most valuable merchandise. The heat was intense, smoke beginning to drift through the open windows as the fire in the lumberyard grew. Suddenly, a thunderous crash echoed from behind the store. Louisa screamed as the building shook. The stacked timber collapsed, Martha realized. "We need to get out, now." "Pa's still on the roof," Louisa cried, starting toward the back stairs. Martha caught her arm. "I'll get him." "Take these to safety." She thrust the strong box into Louisa's hands and pushed her toward the front door. Smoke filled the back stairwell as Martha climbed to the roof access. She could hear shouting and the crackle of flames growing closer. "Elias!" she called, pushing open the hatch. Heat blasted her face as she emerged onto the roof. Elias and another man were desperately beating at flames that had taken hold at the rear corner of the roof. As Martha watched in horror, a burning timber from the lumberyard crashed onto the store's back porch, sending a shower of sparks upward. "We need to go," Martha shouted. "The fire's spreading too fast." Elias turned, his face black with soot. "Martha, get back inside." "Not without you." She moved toward him, then screamed as a section of the roof near his feet suddenly gave way. Elias staggered, dropping to his knees as the other man scrambled away. Martha lunged forward, grabbing Elias's arm just as the weakened shingles began to crumble beneath him. For a terrifying moment, she thought they would both fall through into the inferno below. Then strong hands gripped her waist, pulling them both back from the edge. "I've got you," Tyler's voice said in her ear. "Both of you." Together, they dragged Elias to the roof hatch and down the smoke-filled stairs. Outside, they collapsed on the street as bucket brigades fought desperately to save the row of businesses. It was nearly dawn before the fire was finally brought under control. The lumberyard was destroyed and 3 buildings were burned to the ground. Holloway's general store still stood, but the rear third of the building was badly damaged. The roof partially collapsed and the contents were ruined by smoke and water. Martha, Elias, Louisa, and Tyler sat on a bench across the street, watching numbly as the first light of day revealed the extent of the destruction. "At least we saved the papers and cash," Louisa said, her voice hoarse from smoke. Elias put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "We can rebuild the damaged section. Insurance will cover most of it." "We should consider brick for the rear wall," Martha said, her practical nature asserting itself despite her exhaustion. "As a fire break." Tyler smiled tiredly. "Already planning improvements, Martha?" "Someone has to think ahead," she replied, but returned his smile. Elias looked between them, something shifting in his expression. "Tyler," he said gruffly, "I owe you my life." "If you and Martha hadn't come up to the roof when you did—" "Anyone would have done the same," Tyler said. "Not anyone," Elias insisted, "and not after how I've treated you these past years." An uncomfortable silence fell between the men. Finally, Tyler spoke. "Margaret's death wasn't your fault, Elias." "Nor was it mine. It was consumption, plain and simple. No tonic could have saved her." Elias's weathered face crumpled slightly. "I know that. I've always known it. But blaming you was easier than blaming myself for believing in miracles. We all want to believe in miracles when we're losing someone we love," Martha said softly. Louisa wiped tears from her smoke-reddened eyes. "Ma wouldn't want us fighting." She always liked Mr. Bennet's newspapers. A surprised laugh escaped Elias. "That she did." "She used to save his editorials, especially the ones that criticized me." He shook his head. "Margaret always did enjoy seeing me taken down a peg." Tyler offered his hand. "Perhaps it's time to put the past behind us." After a moment's hesitation, Elias took it. "For Margaret's sake. And for the future of this town." The weeks after the fire were a blur of activity. The store remained closed for repairs, but Martha, Elias, and Louisa worked tirelessly to prepare for reopening. They took the opportunity to reorganize everything, implementing many of the changes Martha had suggested over the past months. Tyler reported on the fire and recovery efforts in the Gazette, including a glowing account of Martha's bravery that made her blush when she read it. He also helped with the reconstruction, proving surprisingly handy with tools for a newspaper man. As they worked side by side, rebuilding shelves one afternoon, Martha found herself studying Tyler's profile. He had intelligent eyes and a firm jaw softened by his gentle smile. Something had shifted between them since the fire, a recognition of feelings too strong to ignore. But there was also Elias. Their shared ordeal had created a bond neither had expected. As they worked together to rebuild the store, Martha discovered layers to the gruff shopkeeper she'd never anticipated. He had a dry wit, a passionate commitment to the town's growth, and a deep, abiding love for his daughter that he struggled to express. One evening, as they reviewed plans for the grand reopening, Elias surprised her with a question. "Are you in love with Tyler?" Martha nearly dropped the paper she was holding. That's a very personal question, Mr. Holloway." "Elias," he corrected softly. "After nearly dying together, I think we can use first names." Martha smiled despite her discomfort. "Why do you ask? Elias?" He shrugged. "I see how he looks at you. How you look at him when you think no one's watching." He paused, "And I see how confused you are about it." "I'm not confused," Martha protested weakly. "Aren't you? Your husband's been gone less than 6 months. You're still finding your footing in this town and in this business. And now there's Tyler with his books and ideas and gentle ways." Martha felt heat rise to her face. "I don't see how this is relevant to the store." "It's relevant to our partnership," Elias said bluntly. "I need to know if you're staying, Martha. If you're committed to what we're building here." The question caught her off guard. "Of course I am. The store is my livelihood. And if Tyler asked you to marry him, would you give up your share? Move on to being a newspaper editor's wife?" Martha hadn't allowed herself to consider this possibility directly. "Tyler respects my independence," she said carefully. "He wouldn't expect me to abandon my business interests." Elias studied her for a long moment. "You know, Margaret was the finest business partner I could have asked for. We built this store together and shared everything. The work, the worry, and the triumph when we succeeded." His voice roughened. "When I lost her, I lost more than my wife. I lost the other half of everything that mattered to me." Martha felt a lump form in her throat. "I didn't know. How could you?" Elias shook his head. "I've done everything possible to keep people at a distance since she died. Even Louisa." "Especially Louisa," Martha said gently. "She's so like her mother, isn't she?" "The very image," Elias agreed, his expression softening. "She has the same spirit and the same fire." He looked directly at Martha. "She needs a woman in her life, Martha. Someone to guide her, to show her that strength and femininity aren't opposed." Martha felt short of breath, suddenly understanding what Elias was implying. "Elias, I'm not declaring undying love," he said quickly, a flush rising above his beard. "I'm talking about partnership in the fullest sense. You have a gift for this business. You've brought life back to this store and to my daughter. Perhaps in time, we might consider a more permanent arrangement, one that would secure your future and Louisa's." The proposal, practical and unromantic as it was, still left Martha stunned. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything now," Elias replied, gathering his papers. "Just think about it, about what kind of future you want." The grand reopening of Holloway's General Store, now officially Holloway and Fraser's General Emporium, was a triumph. It seemed the entire town turned out to see the renovated space, admire the new brick rear wall, and peruse the expanded inventory. Martha, elegant in a new blue dress she'd made from fabric from their own stock, greeted customers alongside Elias and Louisa. Tyler covered the event for the Gazette, his pride in Martha's accomplishments evident in every note he took. As the busy day finally wound down, Martha found herself momentarily alone in the new office they'd built at the back of the store. The ledgers, which had been saved from the fire, lay open on the desk. They showed healthy sales figures for their first day back in business. "You had quite a success," Tyler said from the doorway. Martha looked up with a smile. "It was beyond what we hoped for." He entered, closing the door partway. "You've accomplished something remarkable here, Martha. This store, this partnership with Elias, it's transformed both of you." "All of us," she corrected. "Louisa seems to be a different girl now." "And I've been offered a position," Tyler said abruptly. "Editor of a newspaper in Denver." It has a larger circulation and better printing equipment. They were impressed with my coverage of the fire. Martha felt her heart sink. That's wonderful, Tyler. It's a great opportunity. I haven't accepted yet, he said, watching her closely. I wanted to speak with you first. Me? Why would my opinion matter for your career decision? Tyler moved closer. Because I love you, Martha. I think you know that. Martha's breath caught. Tyler, please let me finish. He took her hands gently. I love your intelligence, your courage, and your quiet strength. These past months, watching you rebuild your life after William, seeing you stand up to Elias and then work alongside him, it's been extraordinary. Martha felt tears threatening. I care for you too, Tyler, deeply. Enough to consider a future together? He asked softly. In Denver, perhaps? Or here, if you prefer. I could turn down the offer and continue with the Gazette. Before Martha could respond, a noise from the doorway made them both turn. Elias stood there, his expression unreadable. Pardon the interruption, he said stiffly. Louisa was asking for you, Martha. She has questions about the ribbon display. Of course, Martha said, withdrawing her hands from Tyler's. I'll be right there. Elias nodded and disappeared. Tyler sighed. It seems I've forced your hand before you were ready. I'm sorry. No, Martha said firmly. It's time for clarity. For decisions. She straightened her shoulders. I need some time, Tyler. Can you give me that? Before you decide about Denver? He smiled gently. For you, Martha Fraser, I would wait an eternity. That night, Martha sat alone in her small apartment, truly facing the choice before her. Two possible futures stretched ahead, each with its own promise and complications. With Tyler, she could have a partnership of minds. Intellectual stimulation, shared values, and gentle companionship. He would support her independence, encourage her growth. In Denver, they could build a new life together, free from the shadows of the past. With Elias and Louisa, she would have family, not born of passion, perhaps, but of shared purpose and mutual respect. The store would be her legacy as much as theirs. Louisa needed her guidance, and Elias, beneath his gruff exterior, offered security and a chance to build something lasting in Cottonwood Springs. Neither choice was wrong. Both men valued her for her mind as well as her heart, something William, for all his kindness, had never truly done. Martha rose and went to the small writing desk by the window. Opening the drawer, she removed a letter she'd received the previous week. It was an offer from her father to return to Boston and resume her position in his company. She now had 3 options. It wasn't hard for her to set her father's letter aside. Whatever her choice was, she would not go backward. In the moonlight streaming through her window, Martha saw Cottonwood Springs spread below. There were the buildings, the people, and the life she'd unexpectedly built here after losing everything she thought mattered. She had come as William Fraser's wife and would remain as her own woman, whatever path she chose. The sound of the fire bell shattered the silence, but thankfully it wasn't the frantic clanging of an alarm, but the single measured toll that marked the hour. It was a reminder that time moved forward and that decisions couldn't be postponed indefinitely. Martha took a short breath. By morning, she would have her answer. The next day dawned clear and bright. Martha arrived at the store early, before Elias or Louisa. She arranged the displays, counted the previous day's receipts, and prepared herself for the conversation to come. When Elias arrived, she was waiting in the office with a cup of coffee. "You're here early?" he remarked, hanging his hat on the rack. "I needed to think," Martha said, offering him a cup. "About what you said?" "About the future." Elias accepted the coffee, his expression guarded. "And Tyler's offer?" "Denver sounds like a fine opportunity." "It is," Martha agreed. "For the right person." She moved to the window, looking out at Main Street, which was coming to life in the morning sun. The newspaper office was visible just down the way, Tyler already at work setting type for the day's edition. "When William died, I thought my life was over," Martha said quietly. "Everything I'd planned, everything I'd expected, it was gone in an instant. I came to your store that first day because I had nowhere else to turn." Elias remained silent, watching her. "What I found here wasn't just employment or even partnership," Martha continued. "I found purpose. I found that I'm capable of far more than I ever imagined." She turned to face him. "You and Louisa in this store, You've become my world, Elias, my home. The lines around his eyes softened. And Tyler? Tyler is a good man. In another life, perhaps. She shook her head. But my place is here? With the store. With you and Louisa, if you'll have me. Elias set down his coffee cup and crossed to her. His hands, rough from years of work, gently took hers. I'm not an easy man, Martha. I'm stubborn and set in my ways. A smile tugged at her lips. I've noticed. But I promise you this. I will respect you as my equal in this business and in life. I will value your mind as much as your heart. His voice dropped. And I will try to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me. That's all any of us can do, Martha said softly. We all try our best each day. The bell above the front door jingled, followed by Louisa's voice calling out a greeting to the first customer of the day. Shall we? Elias asked, offering his arm. Martha placed her hand on his arm, feeling the strength beneath the rough fabric of his shirt. Not the future she had imagined, but perhaps the one she was meant to find. Yes, she said, let's begin. As they walked together into the store. Their store. Martha caught sight of Tyler through the front window. He was crossing the street, a newspaper in hand, his expression thoughtful. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Some choices close doors, others open new ones. And sometimes the most unexpected path leads exactly where you were meant to be all along.